Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Hello, Cara.
Hello.
Over to you, everybody.
Thank you.
Make her feel welcome.
I need to... Yeah? Oh, does that work? Yeah? You can hear me? Okay, good. I'm going to hide over here, unlike Alison, who's brave enough to stand there. So, hello, I'm Cara. I do work at the Co-op Digital now, but for probably the last 10 or so years, I've worked in digital product agencies for various clients of various shapes and sizes. And I've been, I suppose, realizing over the years that I've been helping people a lot through the journey of what we know as digital transformation. So I'm assuming that there's probably people here who have been involved in digital transformation in some form or another. So whether it's your business or you're working with clients going through it. I think every talk, or well, probably most talks I've seen, most articles I read, they all seem to focus on really high-level, strategy-based approaches to transformation. Lots of it is about things that you or I would never be able to actually do. We'd never be able to go into a boardroom and have those conversations. And also, when you look at Google, for example, digital transformation always seems to look something like this. So it's like, I'm going to shake hands with a circuit board. There's all these weird shapes floating out of a phone. I'm actually turning into binary. It always seems to be white men in business suits as well. So, I don't know, does any of that look familiar to anyone here? No, me neither. For me, in my experience, this is what digital transformation is. So it's about getting a bunch of people together to make a thing. They quite often will come from really different backgrounds and different walks of life. You have the digital people, and quite often you have the non-digital people. And that's always a new experience each time. And so that's what I want to talk about. So I'm going to talk you through something specifically that I worked on at Co-op. I helped to kick off, and then I kind of stepped back and kept in touch with the teams throughout. And it's something we worked on with the food business. And hopefully, at least, if there might be nothing that you learn from this, but you might just feel a bit satisfied that you're not the only one going through some of this stuff. So first, I'll just go back a bit in time to the Co-op. So Co-op started in 1844, and it started on the basis of, at the time, workers were being treated really, really badly, and the food that they were getting was really, really bad. It was really expensive. They were actually cutting flour with chalk in order to make profit. So a bunch of people got together and thought they wanted to start something a bit different, based around cooperation and a fair crack for everyone at, getting decent food for non-profit. And that still stands very much today, although since this, it's grown massively. It at one point owned pharmacies, it owned banks, the food stores grew. There was a bit of a rocky time in the recent years, but so now this is how it looks. It's sold off the banks, it's sold off the pharmacies, actually sold off a lot of farmland. Its key businesses now are food, funeral care, insurance, legal, and electrical. Food is very much the biggest part of the business. So in 2015, Co-op Digital entered the building, and you can see in the background, that's their head office there. This is the Federation building, and this is where we live. So some of Co-op Digital, so there's around 200 of us now. Some of us came from the internal Co-op group, but most of us, I think, came completely new. So we'd never worked inside a business like this before. But we all formed with the ambition to start to create more user-centered products and services, and also to help our existing businesses use digital in a more effective way. And this is how we like to work. So similar to what Alison was talking about, we tend to work in really rapid periods of time. So we'll start with a discovery. When we come into the problem space, we'll do some very quick immersion into what we're doing, so whatever that may be. We'll then move into an alpha phase where we're doing, again, very quick research, testing, learning, building, and then we'll move on to beta if we feel that what we're doing is worth doing. So we work in this way to reduce waste and to fail as quickly as we can. And we've actually made great strides working with the funeral care business, also doing an online wills service. Using this technique has actually been a great success. But the one thing we hadn't done at the point I joined was work with the food business, the biggest part of the business. So this is what we came to do. And when we work with different business units, we're always going to work with the subject matter experts from that part of the business. So in this case, I want to introduce someone called Emma, who is one of our subject matter experts. She's kind of in the middle there with the blonde hair. I want to talk a bit from her perspective because I think it's really important to get the two different views of how this project was. So Emma started in stores. She was a store manager, she was then a regional manager, and then she kind of carried it on through the ranks and was then plucked from her field job to work with us in the head office on a digital project. It was the first time she'd ever done anything like this before. And this is generally how Emma would have done project management. It's very familiar to some of you, I imagine. So we're talking classic waterfall. There's a lot of work done up front on what you're going to build. So she's used to feeding into very, very long documents with very, very clear deliverables, knowing exactly what the thing is. And then you hand it to someone and you ask them to build it. And then you wait and see what happens. Along the way, there's quite a lot of stage gates to get through. That involves a lot of meetings, quite a lot of bureaucracy. That's just how they work. And also, Food's idea of digital at the time was probably using WhatsApp to talk to other people. They didn't really have an idea of what that meant for them. And we came together to work on this wider program that was happening throughout Food. And the big question that we were trying to solve was how we can give store colleagues back the time to be shopkeepers. Because of the way stores work, there's a lot of paper-based processes. And actually, shopkeepers, store managers spend a lot of time in the back office using systems like this. So this was Emma's work stream. It was all to do with policies and procedures. So this was the system in the back office where someone, if, say, for example, I'm not sure what this policy is about, but say, for example, someone leaves their card in a store and you need to know what you do as a store manager. You then have to go into the back office, you have to log into this system, search for this policy and try to read what you do. I mean, it wasn't really working. In fact, a lot of store managers were just phoning up the help desk in the central building that you saw to try and find out what to do. So we were getting loads of calls. And similarly, this is an example of what a baker in a store would have to do in order to record how many things they baked that day and to try and do some weird prediction of how many things they needed to bake tomorrow based on weather and all kinds of strange things. That also wasn't really working, and it was actually still wasting quite a lot of products. So that's just an idea of some of the processes that are happening in stores. So we got together for our discovery. This is the digital team. This is Dave, another one of our subject matter experts, getting together to really immerse ourselves into this problem space. I noticed, actually, I'm standing in the background there looking a bit miserable. But I was just intently listening. We had to get our heads around how the hell this business works, from the logistics, from getting things into stores, from once they come into store. We did a lot of service blueprints. You can see in the background there, like big service maps of how things work. And then we got people together from all the different roles to say, what are the pain points at the moment? We also went out into stores and talked to a lot of people. So we talked to like over 50 store colleagues, 36 store managers. Interestingly, when we talked to some of the colleagues, if their managers were there, they didn't seem to give us the same types of answers that they would if they weren't. So, we learned quite as we went along that there was quite a bit of hierarchy in the food business. We also listened to a lot of calls and kind of tried to understand what are the themes, what are people calling, this is the stores calling the head office, what are the problems that they're having. And we also used sketching as a way of idea generation. So we invited all these people to come and help us think about what the ideas we could have to solve these problems. And from Emma's perspective, this is something that she'd never been asked to do before. It was, really out of her comfort zone. People seemed to come along and get into it, though, and it was actually quite good. They actually started to use sketching themselves in other sessions, so we were quite impressed with that. So we'd spent quite a few weeks doing this discovery. We'd come up with actually 3 work streams out of this. One was Emma's work stream to do with policies and processes. One was to do with holiday booking. So at the time, you had to fill in a form to book your holiday. It then got lost. There was lots of people unclear about what shifts they were working on. And then the third one was to do with all the store managers' tasks that they had to do. So they would literally have paper lists. I think there were 76 paper processes that they had. So those are 3 teams that were formed. So Emma was the subject matter expert for one team, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So she'd been working with the digital team for a few weeks. This is how the digital team were feeling at that time. So they had very much a way of working, which I described. We had very clear ceremonies of how that worked. The usual show and tells and sprint planning sessions, but it seemed that they were getting a lot of requests for extra details and extra sign-off, an extra meeting on top of the meeting. And that was stressing the team out a bit because they weren't actually able to do their jobs. And also, we'd be inviting people to show and tells, and we'd get quite good attendance, but we were quite often met with just silence. So when we asked for feedback, we were expecting, people to actually interact and give us feedback that we could genuinely use. But I don't think people really knew that we could change what we were doing, and they almost didn't know how to interact with us. Now, I interviewed Emma recently for this talk, and I asked her what it was like at this stage for her. And these were some of the things that she noticed. So the number one thing that she noticed was she's so used to working in this hierarchy that when you come and work with an agile team for the first time, it's really disturbing that you can't see who tells who what to do. And she was really confused about that. She didn't feel comfortable going and asking oh, can you tell them to do that a bit? Because she could see that the team were a quite flat structure. And that made her a bit uncomfortable. And also, she had a real lack of, this is her quote, by the way, she felt really uncomfortable saying when can something happen, because she felt that she wasn't allowed to ask because, the agile team are in charge of their own backlog, and that's just how we work. And I think what was behind some of this, which refers back to what Alison was saying earlier, is that there was a real low level of psychological safety there, because Emma didn't feel like she could actually ask because she felt stupid that she didn't know what she was supposed to do. And also, expecting someone to come and trust a team straight away when they're not used to ever doing that before was also a really big ask. And I think she just didn't know how she fit into that team. So we were expecting a lot of her, but we didn't really guide her enough on what we wanted her to do and what her role was. And I'm skipping forward massively here because obviously this went on for quite a while. There were ups and downs, but progress was made and we did deliver some things. Hooray. This is one of the things. So that system I showed you earlier with the really hard to read policy, there was a huge, the team did an amazing job at kind of not only taking the content from a really illegible format into something that people could read, but they also created this site which was iterated, weekly, maybe even daily sometimes. What happened then? Oh. When we went out to stores. I thought I'd drop something. So this was all iterated based on people's feedback, and it's gone down really well. It was also the first thing that Co-op had ever delivered themselves to one of their own stores, like massive achievement. And we can tweak it whenever we want, you know? If someone wants a different colour, we'll change it. And that really blew their minds, honestly. This is another prototype that we made around the store manager tasks. So, and this is constantly evolving as well based on feedback. It's got, you know, for instance, when a delivery is due, all the tasks a store manager needs to do. We can also surface any of the other stats that they need. And this one is one of the most kind of organically grown prototypes. I think we put it into 10 stores as an alpha. And now it's got 600 users because it's just kind of grown organically. People want to use it to check when their shifts are, and to book holidays. So that's going into beta now. So we're going to start rolling that out to more stores. So amazing. The team did a great job. We got through a lot of ups and downs, but I think I facilitated a big retrospective, so like a timeline retrospective for Emma's team, just to look back at the whole period of time and what, you know, a lot of these things came out that I've just mentioned, but also I think there's things that I've learned over the years when I've worked with clients in this kind of environment that I think we would be foolish not to take forward. So I'll just talk you through those. So I think in the beginning, when you're setting off on something like this, you need to really acknowledge that how this is going to feel for people. So I don't think we can go in there saying it's all going to be fabulous all the time. It's actually going to feel really uncomfortable and really difficult. So you can do that in a conversation. You could actually run a session about that and get people's feedback. You know, sometimes you might do a pre-mortem about what you think the risks are, but you could also just have a conversation. How do you think this is going to feel? What are the difficult bits going to be? I think that can really help you to get in the right mindset. Another thing is to acknowledge that you're delivering, but you're also taking people on an almost training journey. So you need to make sure that you're factoring time in for learning and support. So what we do now when we set up on things like this is we'll make sure someone like Emma has a couple of weeks to get up to speed on what Agile is, why we work in this way. We'll take her to meet some of the other teams and just get a real feel for what this is before we jump her into a full-on discovery. So we need to acknowledge that that's needed. And then this is, you know, you should do this anyway regardless, but it's really important when you're working with someone who might come with a list of deliverables, so clients probably especially, that you're not focused on deliverables versus your deliverables. You just need to focus on what your outcomes are. So you need to come back to that question that we had at the beginning, you know, how can we give people time back, not the detail of what we want to deliver. And you need to print whatever your outcome is up, big letters, and just keep referring to it so that you can have this shared understanding of what you're there to do, regardless of whether you're business or user. And this is a really important one. So if you're a project manager, delivery type, or if you're a product manager, you've probably got an equivalent on the other side. So, you know, for me, when I used to work with clients, I'd straight away go and find the other project manager and make friends with them and just bond with them straight away. And I think that's really, really important because the more you get to know people on a one-on-one level, the rest of the team will see that you're forming bonds. And these are some things just throughout any kind of project. I think when someone's silent, so when I was talking to Emma about this, she said a lot of the time she'd be in a sprint planning session and she wouldn't be saying anything. So I think the team made an assumption that, oh, she gets what we're doing, it's all fine. But I think as a coach or a project manager or anyone really, you need to just make sure that you're clarifying that people know what you're talking about. Just because someone's silent, it doesn't mean they know. So make sure you ask the clarifying questions. I don't have a problem with asking really stupid questions because I think probably someone there is quite grateful that I did because they don't want to look stupid because they don't feel safe. So that's something to remember always. Another thing to remember always is that it doesn't matter what department you're from, but I'm sure you've all you've all heard people, and I've done it myself, just dismiss a whole department on because they're IT or they're procurement or they're from risk or they're an absolute nightmare. But when you start to talk in that way, you're disconnecting yourself from your colleagues, and that's really not a good way to be. So just remember to be humble about, you know, who you're working with, and just be curious. Try and get to know them. And yeah, just something to remember. And this came up a lot when I was doing client work, is that the team are not only delivering something, but there's this extra layer on top that you're doing, which takes a lot of energy, and you need quite a lot of resilience for that, especially when you're in that project manager role, because you find yourself having to support the team, but also then having to keep someone else happy, and it can be really exhausting. But something that's occurred to me in this particular project was that on the flip side, when I talked to someone like Emma, I'd never really considered how exhausting it is when you're being transformed. So you're having to learn an entire new way of working that this team seems so happy to do and they're so willing to do. And you're trying to do that at the same time as having a boss, you know, trying to ask you when that's going to be ready. So I think you just need to remember that when you're working with people who haven't ever worked in this way before. So this is how we are today. So Emma and Chris, this is them presenting back their work at one of our digital all-hands. It was a really amazing presentation because when I remembered where we were at the beginning of that with the kind of what the hell is this, coming now to them presenting back how they worked, they're so proud of what they've done. The things that came out when I was talking to Emma was about how much she'd never considered the user-centered approach before, so she'd never thought about being able to ask people and then build something to their needs, and the fact that we now have that capability that we can tweak based on feedback. I think she's really excited and she wants to work in this way going forward. And also, these types of projects, I mean, it's not just this, but the funeral care and everything that we're doing is starting to build this network throughout the co-op group. So we're getting all kinds of people coming and requesting to know more about digital ways of working. And, you know, we're also doing masterclasses and things like that to try and teach them techniques. But what we're finding is that a lot of what they're asking isn't really about the tech. It's actually about the people side. So a lot of it's about how to collaborate, how to form teams, how to work effectively. But I think if there's one thing that I've taken from all of this, it's about the users and the teams and the connections. So if I was to start, and this is my final thought, I feel like I've rushed through this quite massively, but might be okay. I think we need to focus on the teams and the users, but really the connections that we make. So when we come into something like this, how can we make these connections? And that's it. How did I do for time?
I think you came in about 5 minutes before the break.
Oh.
But that's all right.
Okay.
Do you want to answer some questions?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
First of all, I have to apologise. I dropped my mic
Oh, that
on
was
the floor.
you.
That was me. I'm so sorry. It wasn't
me.
you. There's
Yes.
been quite a lot of noise, actually. So the rumbling that you hear every now and again, that's the trams going over us. But don't worry, it's a very solid building. A question right here.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for the talk. That's really good. One question.
Yes.
On Alison's talk previously.
Yeah.
If you went back
Yeah.
and did it again, what 1% changes would you make?
That's really good. I think, yeah, that's a really good question. And, oh God, just 1%. I think there's probably like 90% things I would have changed. But
Yeah.
I think one thing would be what I said about taking Emma on a bit of a journey before we started. And that's, in fact, there's another thing kicking off with some other subject matter experts. And I'm making sure that that delivery manager is taking time to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to help a lot. Oh, I hope it's going to help a lot. So probably just that one, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Is there anyone else before I ask mine? Right, I'm going to jump in. Oh, there's one over there, actually.
Yeah, we work with Co-op on the digital side in terms of delivering
Oh, yeah?
HTML, CSS, etc.
Who do you work for?
Really good guidelines for obviously you went through quite a transformation in terms of business.
Yeah.
Is there anything similar on what you were just talking about? Any like sort of white papers or
When I joined, like that was one of my jobs that I was supposed to be doing, which was to try and work. So there's a wonderful design manual that the design team have worked on, and I would love to do something similar on like delivery techniques. Is that what you mean? Yeah. So we have a bunch of things, but we just haven't spent the time because we've been too busy actually doing that. But it's something I want to focus on this year. Yeah, just pull it together and do some kind of, I don't want to say playbook, but what do you call it? What did you call it?
I don't know. It's supposed to be it's almost like a guide, really.
A guide, yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, I'd like to do it, but checklist, yeah. Haven't done that, no, but might do.
Is there anyone else? Well, I was just going to ask, when you talked about starting off the beginning,
Yeah.
and you talked about talking about how it's going to feel, do you do that with the team and your clients, if you like, and how do you facilitate that?
Yeah, I've only seen it done with when I was doing client work. There was one thing that we did where you like drew, so we'd have our plan, our kind of, we know we're going to work together for 3 months, we know we need to launch then, these are the milestones. And we got people to kind of predict, when you do a timeline retrospective, you kind of draw how it was. So we get people to predict how they think it might be, what do they think is going to be the difficult bits, and then just have a conversation around that. So say like, oh yeah, you're right, that probably is going to be difficult because, it's more like just to get it in the open rather than, obviously you don't know what it's going to be like, but just to acknowledge the fact that it's probably not going to be amazing all the time.
Yeah. Probably not going to be amazing. I'm going
All
to say
the time. Yeah.
Well, I'll say that to every single one of my clients. All right, so I reckon we're about ready for a break, some tea and coffee.
I am.
Thank you to Cara, first of all.